We have over 70 million youths outside of Africa. That is a pool of talent that we're not tapping into. These are students that have global exposure, that have bold ideas, that have access to certain tools, tech tools, and so on that can be utilized. These are a lot of students of African descent that understand the terrain, but also understand global view of things. So they're bringing that to your organization.
My next guest, Ola Erogbogbo, is a Nigerian-American growth strategist and the co-founder of DOWA, which stands for Doing Good Work in Africa. DOWA was built during the pandemic with her co-founder as a global talent circulation platform that connects diaspora students and globally trained young people to African-led organizations doing real meaningful work in health tech, climate, AI, digital inclusion, and more. In 5 years, DOWA has attracted over 3,000 students applicants from 40 plus universities. It has deployed more than 100 interns across 20 plus organizations in 11 African countries and has generated over 500,000 minutes of hands-on project collaboration. This is not a charity. This is an infrastructure. Before DOWA, Ola was a director at Publicis Media, one of the largest media and communication groups where she sat at the intersection of growth strategy and new businesses. She's also the founder of Deinté Fine Jewelry, a brand rooted in her Nigerian heritage, where she built first in Nigeria and expanded to North America. She's been featured in BBC Africa, Forbes Africa, Guardian Nigeria, Business Day, and Business Inside Africa. She has the ears of the Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission. She has support from Google, the International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations. This year, DOWA is launching its first in-person internship program, bringing diaspora talent physically onto the grounds across Africa. Ola believes the diaspora's greatest contribution is not expertise or capital. It is deliberate presence. The intentional choice to stay connected, to build across distances, and to refuse to let geography become an excuse for disengagement. Please welcome Ola to Africa Capital Connect. Ola, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kwame. Excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. Ola, I'm so excited to have you here. You've done a lot. I just want to get right into your background. Can you walk me through where you were born, where you grew up, and what got you into entrepreneurship journey?
Thank you. Thanks for that great introduction. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, believe it or not. My parents found their way here in the 70s for college. And so they got married here. I was born here, but I actually got to move back to Nigeria with my parents when I was 4. So even though I was born in the US in Dayton, Ohio, I actually grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and spent um, the most part of my formative years in Lagos, Nigeria. I did at some point move back to the US for college. And so came back to the US for college and then got to experience college in the US, in Chicago precisely, and also then got to experience, the work culture working in corporate. But in terms of, I'll describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. I grew up around my parents who were very entrepreneurial and very creative. And so my dad was in real estate. At some point, even though he had his day job, my mom was also into retail, even when she was doing a 9 to 5. So I grew up around people that were very entrepreneurial. My grandma, my uncles, my aunt. And so I actually supported or helped my mom during those years while I was in Nigeria. So it's sort of inbuilt because I kind of grew up around it. I was always like, you have a 9 to 5. You should, before I even found out about you need to have 7 streams of income. It was always never put your eggs in one basket, right? When I was growing up. So I would say that's my first introduction to what being entrepreneurial meant and being able to juggle more than one ball through life and sort of support yourself and support your family That's how I would say I was introduced to being entrepreneurial.
And how was that transition, Ola, from living in Nigeria? I know you were born here and then going to Nigeria and living and then coming back for college. Was that a huge transition for you to switch from the way things were in Nigeria to the US?
My years in living in Nigeria, I knew that I was born in Nigeria. I knew that that meant I had a blue passport because there were times I had to get it renewed. But I didn't know what that really meant or the magnitude of what that really meant. And so when it was time to go to college, several at the time people were still going abroad to go study. It was a thing at the time. So moving away from home, I was in boarding house for high school. So I had experience being away from home for long periods of time, but this was a total different thing. You're across the world. Mobile phones were, um, a huge thing at the time. Um, and so being away from parents, being away from everything that was really like a heavy weight. Especially being in a climate that was totally different from the Nigerian climate. I remember, I think my first winter, I just could not understand why people chose to live in an ice box. That's that's how I described it. But yeah, I it was definitely a huge transition. I think no matter what people tell you about going somewhere that is different from home till you experience it, you never fully understand how you react to being in the different place that you don't necessarily have the same support that you had when you were home.
So you went to college here. Do you remember your exact first business you started? Because you say you're known as a serial entrepreneur. What was your first product or business you started? Was it after college or while you were in college or?
I think there was always something because I always was kind of person that wanted to pull people together. I think through my life's work, it has been about identifying, gaps and building bridges, whether it's, talent, resources, opportunity, people. So wherever I found myself, I always found a way to try to bring people together, to leverage resources. So even when I was in college, we would have, um, I started the first African student organization in at the college where I was. And we would have like bake sales, or we would have something to raise money to do something or to support um, um, something or someone. So I've always sort of found a way to do something like that. But I would say that the first probably major thing that I started would be the jewelry business. Um, and sort of it's my mom had always been in jewelry, but we essentially formalized it in terms of being a brand and having the first store. And that was a heavy lift. Like it was, it was like if you fail, you fail because there's so much capital going into it. So that would be the first sort of business that I started um with someone. The first thing that I started, I think, on my own would be the nonprofit doing good work in Africa, um, which supports talents in the diaspora, creating a structured pipeline for them to engage on the continent and contribute towards the innovation on the continent.
Although let's talk about that a little bit because you launched DOWA in 2020 during COVID when the whole world was shutting down and the idea of sending people to work in Africa seemed impossible. Most people were in survival mode, right? What was that urgency for you to come up with something like this, and why did you decide to build it during COVID?
Um, so I mean, we started talking about doing good work in Africa before COVID. I had some speaking engagements that involved on college campuses. This one in particular was at Cornell University at their African Development Conference. And I was invited to speak about entrepreneurship on the continent. And they were curious about how I'm able to engage on the continent and, shuttle back and forth. Like, what do you need to do to be able to do that? And some of the conversations I had even after that talk with students were they were really interested in engaging in a meaningful way with Africa, with the continent, beyond, Dirty December, before Dirty December was Dirty December, or before, the year of the return. Uh, Before all that was a thing, a lot of young people's connection with Africa was through the lens of their parents or their grandparents, or, well, through themselves, but also through family members, as opposed to what does it actually take to build something on the continent that impacts not just you, but your community, and is scalable. So some of those students wanted to find ways to engage. And that was actually what sparked my interest in these are amazing, bold, um, visionaries that have exposure to all sorts of resources. How do we get them to engage on the continent? And a stat that was shared by the World Bank last year, the diaspora actually remits about $100 billion to Africa. This was in 2025. Beyond money, I truly believe like the talent of individuals in the diaspora, um, it's something that is not quantifiable, and we need structured pathways in order to sort of funnel that into Africa. Um, and I believe it's a way that we can start to reframe what we see as brain drain into brain gain. So to answer your question, this was before we started thinking about this before COVID. And actually the first pilot we were running was supposed to be an in-person pilot, but COVID hit. When COVID hit, it was either we shut it down or we thought about how to pivot. And some people call me the queen of pivoting. And so we pivoted to virtual engagement. And part of this was because I have sort of run my business in a way that I could be in person or I could engage remotely effectively. And so we saw a way where we could structure it in a way that actually individuals can engage remotely. So we actually started the remote work because before remote work became a thing. I think during COVID that summer, a lot of students had their internships canceled because organizations couldn't figure out how to um, leverage and engage them. But we went full blast, and having the students engage virtually with those African partners.
Hold on, real quickly. You mentioned brain drain, which I believe it refers to the migration of highly educated, skilled professionals like lawyers, doctors that are basically leaving Africa to the Western world, in search for a better pay, political stability, and better living conditions and all that. But I think in your work, you've referred to it as brain circulation. Um, so, what is the difference between the two?
So I wouldn't calling it brain circulation sounds very technical. So it sounds very clinical. So we actually say brain gain, and we say talent circulation, right? Like you're totally right in terms of the definition of brain drain. And we understand the reason why individuals leave their home in search for greener pastures, in search for opportunities where they could provide for themselves and provide for their families. And those reasons still exist. And so when people talk about people um, moving back to Africa, I'm very conscious um, um, in understanding that the reasons why people left is still valid to them. And that is important. I think what we need to think about is, how do we find a way for Kwame to engage meaningfully on the continent? How do we find a way for Kwame to continue to build his life and find ways to be in proximity to what is going on the continent? And that's where we start to talk about talent circulation. Who are those that are on the continent that understand the terrain, that understand how to leverage limited resources in building solutions to challenges, multi-layered challenges that is on the continent? And how do we connect those individuals to individuals that are interested in the diaspora in a way that they can contribute, they can have a symbiotic relationship where there is giving from both ends, and there's a flow of knowledge, a flow of resources, and that's where DOWA comes in. Is Kwame doesn't need to pick up and move to Africa if that is not visible for him, right? Um, and even if that is what the goal is at some point, Kwame needs to start engaging in a way that he better understands um, um, that terrain. He understands the sector that he's interested in. He's building relationships with those that are actually doing work in that area. Um, and he's preparing himself in such a way that he can become a future investor, innovator, advocate, wherever he chooses to live, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Ola, do you think there's two separate diaspora? Because I feel like there's the ones that were born and raised in Africa, came to the United States and been living here for many years and understand the culture, understand what Africa is about. And then there's the diaspora that, through slavery and migration of Africans to the US, Canada, Europe, may not know Africa as much, right? Or don't know much about what's going on the continent. Most of them have a perception of Africa where it's not positive. I remember coming here when I was 10, 11 years old, getting teased by most of my Black American friends that are the diaspora here and making fun of us, not knowing that they're also part of the diaspora. Are you finding that DOA is pulling more of the African born diaspora, or is it more of the American diaspora? Are you seeing that they all seem to be interested in DOA?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there are different diasporas in terms of what you just described. And I can totally relate to what you just said, in how, people are sort of separated themselves based on their experience, and not a lot of understanding between those different groups of people. And I remember being in a class, it was a history class in college, and we're talking about who was to blame on how we feel about each other, or the grievances we hold against one another. And people were saying, different things, but you did this, your people did this, and your people did this, and your people's. And I remember the professor said, there is enough blame to go around. And that is true, right? There is enough blame to go around. I believe that DOWA is a leveling playing field. I believe we've had students that are first generation, second generation. We've had students that are of, individuals that were brought to, the Americas through slavery. We've had students that just came from Africa for college a year or 2 years ago. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing at DOWA. Is we're bringing individuals of different experiences. They get to experience the opportunity in their own way, because they're connecting with this organization that is working in a certain sector, that is building solutions for individuals in communities they would never have been in touch with or experienced. And then they get to now share those experiences with individuals that have different experiences, engaging in different sectors, engaging with different innovators. I think that's the beauty of it. Like the separateness sort of disappears when we're focused on how do we come together to solve a problem for someone else, instead of focusing on us. So, I mean, the opportunity is open to anyone, any student that is interested, both students of African descent, as we described, and even allies. I truly believe like we need everybody that is interested, that has the intention of engaging in a meaningful way to participate.
Oh, a quick question. So I want to understand the clear difference between DOA and other programs, right? Because you have, scholarship programs, you have Diaspora Network, you have NGOs, sending volunteers to Africa. What is different with DOA that none of these organizations have? What is the specific gap in the infrastructure of the diaspora engagement that DOA fills in?
I've been in places where conversations go on, and there's nothing wrong with conversations. I've always just wondered, how do we get participation? How do we figure out what the low hanging fruit is for someone that doesn't know, has a slightest clue on how to start? How do we get them to engage and start to participate? And that's why we created DOWA. We wanted a pipeline or a pathway where people are not imposing their ideas on a community. I think we have, some organizations that come in and they have good intentions, but I've always understood that good intentions are not enough. I listened to this TED talk that talked about, if you want to help somebody, shut up and listen. And I and that's what we built DOOR around, is who is actually doing the work on ground, who is doing meaningful work that is scalable, that is using technology to scale, where people can plug in a student that has great intentions and wants to participate, that is coming in and not saying, this is how I want you to do it, or this is how we've done it somewhere else, but is asking the question and is seeing, oh, what is the problem? What do you think the problem is? And how do you think the problem should be solved? How can I help? Someone that's actually coming in, shutting up and actually listening, learning, and helping with the tools and resources that they have. So they can walk away. They've learned. They can also do that and replicate that in other communities that they engage in. But also on the partner side, they're able to then, strengthen their structure, scale in such a way that they're serving um, a larger community, and they're growing in terms of even then hiring within their community and so on.
Oh, look, can you walk me through the structure of DOA, right? Say I'm a student that applied to become part of DOA. What is the process of getting through, and what is the next step of going, and where am I eventually going to end up at? Is it at the end of the day finding me a job in Africa? Is it at the end of the day just educating me about the continent? What are the process with DOA, and where does it end?
Great question. So our thought process was, how do we equip young individuals to be future innovators, investors, and advocates? Uh, this is not necessarily about moving back to Africa. Is instilling in individuals that wherever they end up and the subject of Africa comes up, they actually have um, the knowledge to actually advocate and speak, because they've had that experience. So a student coming into the program, every student um, is looking for an opportunity to intern. They're looking for experience, right? That's something that is required of them before they graduate, and before they join the workforce. Is a way to reinforce sort of what they're learning in school. And so DOA is an option in terms of internships, right? When a student applies to a DOA internship program, it's similar to when you apply to a Fortune 500 company also. The difference is we are working with partners. The partners are actually the companies that are executing on projects and solutions on the continent in different parts of Africa, in different sectors. We engage with those partners. They already share sort of the projects they're working on, where they would like interns to engage with them and how they would like them to engage with them. And so we take those opportunities and funnel them through our student pipelines. Those students get to apply just like they will apply for opportunities at any company. Then we start to match students to partner organizations, and we give each partner uh, a pool of students. So any partner we've approved to be part of the program, we get a pool of students that then they would review and then determine who they want to interview or hire. So the partners get the last word in terms of who they bring on to engage with them. Now, there are opportunities for students to either engage or intern remotely, hybrid, or in person. In person or hybrid opportunities are usually students that already plan to be in that part of the world during their internship. And so that way, you're working on, for instance, the summer program is 8 to 10 weeks, and you're working on task deliverables and goals that are already set tied to specific project or projects. And so a student walks away with an experience of working in with a global organization on the African continent, working in projects that actually they can see the impact um, immediately or even as soon as down the line, um, local impact actually in communities that it can speak to. So these are sort of out of the box experiences that students have compared to their peers. And so we truly believe like the experience that these students have through the internships sets them up for a career trajectory that their peers do not have. Everybody else might be getting an opportunity to, engage with intern in a corporate organization, maybe in the US or in the UK, wherever they're based, but being able to engage um, with an organization that is actually doing work that impacts, regular people at scale. It's something that students that have gone through the program have spoke highly about when it comes to when they're going on to other opportunities after the DOWA internship. So, and then what we found is that these students down the line keep the interest that they have in Africa through either organizations that they start themselves or being part of organizations that are doing um, other interested work that they have, or they're actually part of a global organization that they're working with, and they're working alongside projects that are actually impacting Africa one way or the other. We've had students turn around and also start to, give back in terms of supporting other interns that participate in the program, or, you know, move back to actually Africa to go, join an organization on the continent or start their own organization.
Are these paid internship programs?
That's a great question. So one of the challenges that we identified right off the bat is we recognize that partners on the continent would not be able to pay competitive rates, right, compared to a Fortune 500 company. So we wanted to have it be a level playing field for partners, but also we wanted students to be able to come in and um, actually, do work and be compensated. So we did some research and we found that there are actually schools that have funding and grants that students can tap into to take an unpaid internship or to do an internship in a developing country. So 40% of our funding model is 40% of our students are able to tap into funding in the school they're attending. DOWA has also been raising funds that we offer as stipends to students. So about 30% of our students are able to tap into the stipends. And then some students choose not to actually tap into any funding for different reasons. But I mean, that's something we want to continue to eliminate, is actually be able to fully offer stipends to students that participate in the program through DOA.
Now, these interns, are they African or are they African American? Are they Caucasian? Like anybody could join DOA as far as participate in this program?
Yes, yes. Anybody, we have it open to students of African descent, whether they're, first generation, second generation, and so on, and allies. Anybody that has, great intentions, that want to engage, on the continent, we open it up to them. Definitely we review, each individual application. This summer we actually had over 700 applications.
Wow.
Students interested in participating in the program. We actually just kicked off our the launch of the cohort. We have about 60 students in this cohort and about 20 partners in this cohort.
Oh, that's very interesting. I like the fact that you guys are including partners, right? Allies, I should say. That doesn't close it off to just diasporas who have African descent or that are African Americans that were brought here through ancestors. I think that creates an opportunity for other people to engage in the continent. I think that's amazing.
I think is very important. I think when you look back at just struggles over centuries, and you look at those that came together to sort of um, help through the struggle. It was people that were part of the struggle, but also allies that recognized and connected with the struggle. And I think that's important in whatever one is, um, or you're doing to actually be inclusive.
No, that's awesome. How are you guys acquiring the companies that these interns are working with? Are they strictly based in Africa, or they could be based in the U.S. or UK or Canada?
Great question. So we are very intentional about organizations on the continent. Now we we do recognize that there are individuals that are actually outside of Africa that are building for Africa. So those individuals are also included in terms of they have an organization, they are specifically building their solution for Africa. So those are part of individuals or partners that we tap into. But yes, we're very intentional about impacting Africa, the continent of Africa and its diaspora. So we tap into organizations that are actually on the continent or building for the continent.
So how long is this internship program for? How long does it last?
So we run two internship cycles programs a year. The summer and the winter. The summer runs from mid June to end of August, and it runs for about 8 to 10 weeks. While the winter runs from mid January to March, and that runs for about 4 to 6 weeks. And the program is actually we structure it in a way where students can engage, but they can also do other things. So engagement is typically about 14 to 16 hours a week.
Although you talked openly about what I think you call the belonging paradox, right? Where there are moments of deep connections on the continent, and then there are moments of feeling completely like an outsider, which I think both are real, right? For a person who is in an audience, for example, who wants to engage, but is afraid of that exact feeling, of feeling like they don't belong, they've never connected with Africa, what would you tell them?
That can happen to anyone. I think my story in terms of, I was born in the US and, I moved to Nigeria when I was 4. I grew up there. came back to the US for college, and actually I moved back at some point to start luxury retail business. Um, there were moments in my journey that I felt like an outsider in the US and in Nigeria, right? Um, and I think it's something that you have to sort of tell yourself that, you know, regardless of what I'm thinking or I'm feeling, I belong, right? And having that support system around you is really crucial. So if I think, you know, being somebody that I've lived in both places at different times. I'm actually currently in Nigeria. I came in last week. I haven't been back maybe in 6 months. There are times I haven't been back for, weeks. And I think even times when I shuttle back and forth, there are times where I do feel like, oh, it's been a few months. I'm not even sure how to navigate this. Or I remember when I actually moved back to the US and actually went back to corporate America. I totally felt out of place. But I think it's just important to remind ourselves, like, no matter what, I'm a human being. I belong in this world. I belong where I'm at. There's a reason and a purpose to why I am where I'm at. There's a reason and a purpose that I yearn to connect with Africa in a meaningful way. And the purpose is bigger than me. I think that's one of the things that grounds me in terms of um, just moving past the belief of feeling like I don't belong. I think focusing on the good I could do and the purpose that I believe that I have.
So, Ola, what is that reason and purpose for you? Because you left Nigeria, came here. A lot of us leave and stay here and never look back, try to get a job in the US and build our family in the Western world. What is that reason and purpose for Ola?
I have always, like I mentioned, that my work has always revolved around creating purpose, pulling talent together, resources, um, and it's led me to different paths in this entrepreneur journey. Even when I was in corporate, I think my corporate work was always revolved around being entrepreneurial. Um, but for me, it's about how I could impact, um, make the world a little better. I think is my purpose. How can I leverage my resources and whatever I've been blessed with, in order to make the world a little better for people around me, or people I connect with. And I think that's what draws me wherever I'm at, whether it's in Nigeria or in the US. Um, is I keep thinking about, communities that I come in contact with, and how I can make it better. And it's not by, any huge amount of money necessarily, right? I told you we started DOWA as a nonprofit, and I think we've run it, bootstrapping. Um, but what low hanging fruit um is there that I can actually, utilize to make life a little better. Whether it's that student that came up to me and said, I'm really interested in Africa. There is something about Africa that I yearn for. I'm third generation. I have never been to Africa before. I don't know where to start. Um, is how do I connect Brianna that came to me with that in such a way that is meaningful. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I started DOWA. So part of it is, looking around you and seeing what is the gap um, that you can start with. Part of it is also, proximity is how, close you get to whatever you yearn for or where you yearn for. Is part of, the process of identifying the gap and engaging.
Is DOA still a non for profit, or have you guys transitioned into a for profit?
DOWA is still a non-profit. We've ran it for, it's been over 5 years now. It's still a non-profit. One of the things we're starting to now look at is We started with students, which was the low hanging fruit. Is it started with the question of how do I connect Brianna, who is um, um, uh, interested in Africa, has never been to Africa, but is a smart, brilliant girl and wants to engage on the continent. Um, and we're able to, connect her to an organization on the continent, which she now has great relationships with in that part of Africa, has done great work and continue to grow in our engagement. And I think it's the purpose that she's found to professionals now interested in how do I also meaningfully engage. I have a 9 to 5, I have a family, I just don't know how to meaningfully engage. Now, how do we connect that professional in a meaningful way to Africa? We're looking at building something we're calling DOWA Legacy Network, where professionals and entrepreneurs that have interest in Africa can engage with students that are already engaging on the continent and now can see Africa through their lens, a fresh, different lens, and also sort of mentor the students, but also build a symbiotic relationship between them. And then also start to look at what ways or what pathways are there to, invest, whether it's in startups or individuals that are building. Um, I and my partner have started to look at, opportunities where we're investing in startups through, VCs or to collectives, um, so that we can sort of see what this looks like down the line for those that might be interested, or even within our community of students that have, that are now alums of the program that are interested in their own startups. How do we support them?
We talk a lot about investing in opportunities. Let me talk about a different kind of investment for a second. Your health is your highest return on investment. That's why I created a brand called Bow Action. We make Vestly Pro adjustable weighted vest, currently on Amazon. The vest adds up to 35 pounds to your body weight, including wrist and ankle weights. If you're serious about investing in your health and not just your portfolio, and you want to support this channel and what we're building, please check out the link in the description below. Every purchase goes directly into keeping these conversations going. Thank you very much for your support. Ola, so what are some of the challenges you're facing right now building DOA?
Great question. I think the first thing that comes top of mind is credibility. We all know that there's a huge trust deficit when we talk about Africa or anywhere in Africa, right? Amongst Africans and, even outsiders. Some might say for good reason, and some might say it's unfair. But either way, it exists. And what anybody that is navigating this system needs to do is build credibility. So that's, I would say, one challenge that DOA faces, right? Getting individuals or organizations to think differently, to accept a new model of the idea of structured pathways for diasporians or allies to engage in Africa. I would say another big challenge will be resources, right? When we talk about credibility, the reason why we're talking about credibility is because we're trying to build an ecosystem of individuals that believe in the vision. So, first is the hurdle of credibility. Second is resources in order to be able to build this ecosystem that interns, future innovators, future investors, future advocates can leverage in order to realize their full potential. So, resources in terms of volunteers, in terms of donors. We don't have any major funding at this point, and we're operating from a lean perspective. So, I would say definitely resources. Another kind of ties into the first is, changing mindsets. People think a certain way. People think about Africa the certain way. People think about how diaspora can engage with Africa, maybe in remittance. But what about talent development? What about structured pathways where you don't have to pick up in Atlanta and physically move to Ghana or anywhere else in Africa? How can I engage from wherever I'm at or wherever I choose to through a structured pathway, through a pathway that is transparent, and I can see the impact for my community and people in my community. Those I would say the major ones are the ones. Another one that I would say more recently is scaling, and it kind of ties into resources. There's a huge, um, especially this summer, we had 700 applications from students trying to engage in Africa through internships. That's the highest volume we've received in one cycle. We have 20 partners that participated in this particular cycle. So that meant limited opportunities, right? We couldn't take all 700. We ended up with about 60 students that are participating in this particular cycle. So how do we keep up with the need and the urgency of those that are interested in engaging in a program such as ours?
What about finding partners and organizations that will accept these students? Is that a challenge for you guys, or are you finding that a lot of organizations are just coming to you guys to partner up?
That's also a challenge. I mentioned that we had 20 partners. We had 700 students that were interested. If we had more partners can actually take students. But then part of it is infrastructure. We actually vet 20 of these partners or a number of partners to make it 20. The partners actually have to have a structure where they can actually take interns because we want it to be a robust engagement for the interns where they're benefiting from the engagement, but also the partners are benefiting from the engagement. If they don't have a particular what's it called specific POC that is actually engaging the interns. They don't have specific projects where students are able to get back and forth feedback on that they can react to. Then it might not. It's an 8 to 10 week internship, right? Which might fly by. So the partners need to be ready to actually enable take interns. The leaders in the organization have to have some sort of engagement, and that leaders of startups or organizations like that can have limited bandwidth. Um, and also organizations being ready to take interns is really important. Obviously, awareness, because a lot of organizations that probably fit the model we're looking for are not aware of what DOWA is doing, but also the potential of being able to engage with student, emerging talent outside of Africa.
When you say POC, is that point of contact?
Yes, that's one of the requirements that we actually ask the partners to have. They have to have one point of contact that the students can engage with. They can have supervisors that they work with on specific projects, but we need one person where we're engaging. The students can go to for questions and so on. They can kind of stay close to this emerging talent or students as they're throughout their internship.
So if I'm an organization, right? What is my incentive to bring on these students and support them through DOWA?
One of the things that I realize, and there's talent everywhere, right? There's talent everywhere. There's not access everywhere. I always look at it as in one opportunity, one mentor, one person speaking for you can open doors. For partners on the African continent, what the pitch is to them is that we have over 70 million youths outside of Africa. That is a pool of talent that we're not tapping into. These are students that have global exposure, that have bold ideas, that have access to certain tools, tech tools, and so on that can be utilized. These are a lot of students of African descent that understand the terrain, but also understand global view of things. So they're bringing that to your organization. They're taking 8 to 10 weeks to engage with you. They're learning from you as an innovator that is leveraging limited resources, that has is leveraging their network in order to develop or scale solutions that are um, addressing developmental challenges in various sectors on the African continent. So, in that regard, these students have value that they can offer you as you're building, as you're structuring, as you're scaling. Um, it's like any other internship, but then you're just opening up to global talent, right? On the flip side, you are also building relationships with these future innovators, future investors, future advocates, right? These students come in and they observe, bring their ideas, they build in things that they've done maybe in other internships or they've seen. Bring in a global perspective, but at the same time, you sort of mentoring this global talent based of your understanding of the terrain, based of your understanding of that sector or that industry, and so on. So it's sort of a symbiotic relationship. And as I said, this might be a future um, individual that moves to Africa or wherever they sit at a table in any part of the world, and the subject of Africa comes up, or the subject of tied to a particular sector that they were involved in, or the organization that they're involved in, they have a place of understanding that they can advocate and they can speak on.
Do these organizations have to compensate the students, or do they have to compensate DOWA for the talent pool they receive?
So we structured DOWA as a free platform. It's free for students. It's free for partners. As of right now, it's been free. And the reason why is we understand that partners on the African continent might not be able to pay competitive rates, right? To students, to a global talent, talent in a global pool. We've looked at other models for compensation. So, for instance, about 40% of us interns are able to tap into funding from their school. So there's certain schools that have pools of funding that are offered as grants that students can apply for if they're taking an unpaid internship or if they're taking an internship in a developing country. So we've seen about 40% of our students being able to tap into that. We've also built a directory of those kind of funding that are within schools or even third party funding that students go apply for. We support them in any kind of documentation that they need for that. DOWA also in the last 2 years has been raising funds. Those funds are offered. It's a limited stipend to students that really want to participate in the program but have no access to funding. And then we have about another 30% of students that choose to participate in the opportunity without any sort of funding or compensation. Now, the engagement, we structure it in a way where students, our suggestion is for them and the partners to engage for about 14 to 16 hours a week. That way, students that are participating in the program are able to take other opportunities, especially because our engagement is very project based. So you can sort of engage based, it's flexible the way you engage. And you can take another internship or you can decide to work some other hours on something else while you're engaging through the DOWA program.
Now, these students, what are the age range of these internship? Is it middle school kids, high school, college? What is the age range?
So we've been engaging with undergrads. So I would say sophomore, juniors, and seniors for the most part. But we have some outliers. We've had once in a while we might have a freshman that came in through one of our strategic education partners that have strong cover letter or portfolio that they shared with us, or have some sort of skill set or what they're studying that matches what a partner is looking for. We've also taken recent graduates in the program. And some partners have also requested students that are graduate students, either they're doing a master's or an MBA or a PhD. We've had some of those students participate in the program.
So anything below college level is not really what you're looking for, because obviously these students might end up working for these organizations permanently, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Not at this time, anyways.
So if I'm a student right now listening to what you just said, and you mentioned that you had over 700 applicants and only 60 were accepted, I'm really concerned now, right? So I'm thinking to myself, what are some of the criteria are you looking for? What are the criteria are you guys really focused on for DOWA? Is it academics, or is it like community service? What are some of the key things you guys are looking for?
So I mean, it's really dependent on our partners, right? And what we tell our partners that these are students. They don't necessarily have a lot of work experience. They're not, they're students, so they have classroom exposure projects that they worked on, and also maybe potentially some other internship that they worked on. And what some of our internship is virtual. We have an in-person portion and also an opportunity for hybrid, right? So our partners come to us with opportunities around, research, around business development, strategy, marketing, communication, some software, back end, hardware related subjects. So those are typically what our partners are looking for. And when it comes to our candidates, how we sort of review. We have who we refer to as strategic education partners, or schools that we have relationship with, where students have maybe come to us through. We've had candidates from those schools, and we've had great reviews from partners that engage with some of those students in those schools. So we sometimes look at that. We also look at, cover letters that are written, and see if what their interests are, does it really match what partners are providing us with in that cycle, whether is what the students' interest is or what they've studied. So those are some of the things we typically look at. We to determine if a student is shortlisted. Now, s- partners make the final decision. So we provide pools of students to each partner based on JDs or work structures or projects that partners are saying they're going to work on during that cycle. Partners then review those pool of students. They review their resume, the cover letter, any portfolio. That's something that we're seeing more of, students that are providing sort of their proof of work through a portfolio. That's something we're encouraging students to provide, because that way, before you even go to an interview, they've sort of seen the kind of work or the kind of projects you worked on, even if you've not done an internship. What projects have you worked on? I know you might have talked about it in your resume, but is there a portfolio that showcases it? Um, and so, some other students provide videos of themselves, pitching themselves. So those are all the sort of materials we provide to the partners, and then the partners then take that short pool of students, candidates that we provide them, and then do a further shortlisting of who they would like to interview.
And if this year you weren't selected, next year you'll have to fill out a whole new application, or do you guys go back to the old pool and say, you know what, we have some great candidates here. Let's review them again for the following year, or how does it work?
So if students are shortlisted and they engage with a partner, and for some reason the partner is like, oh, we would have loved to take 5 interns, but we only have 2 spots. We love these other 3. We have partners saying we would like them to come on board for the next cycle if they're available. So those candidates don't need to go through the whole application process. We would have them, ready, reminding the partner they're available or not, to move forward for the next cycle.
All right, Ola, I want to switch topic a little bit. You started a fine jewelry brand called Deinté that is rooted in your Nigerian culture and heritage. I want to understand, how did that get started and how are you managing that on top of all the other stuff you're doing with DOWA?
So someone will describe me as a serial entrepreneur, right? So jewelry, I've always been a creative person. Jewelry started, it was more of a family thing. My mom loves jewelry. She was in the jewelry business. Um, and so I always tell people that when you're looking to start something, look around you for what's already established that is around you that you can leverage and scale. That can serve somewhat as a revenue stream that you can utilize to build other things. And so I love being creative. I love the jewelry business because of the impact it has on people. The reason, one of the, I think the first time I knew I was going to go into jewelry was, I think I was helping my mom. This was in high school before I even went to college, and she had some customers or clients that she was engaging with, and this woman was talking about how when she's low and sad, she brings out pieces she had collected over time. And the reason, she started thinking about the reasons why she collected those pieces. She starts thinking about how she wants to pass this on to her kids and her grandkids as heirlooms. And I saw a different side of what jewelry meant, right? She had stories she was telling about how and why she collected each piece and what it meant and who she would like to give it to. I think that was the first time I knew that, oh wow, jewelry is not just jewelry. Um, it's actually meaningful to someone's life. It could serve as an investment. It could hold, family stories. It could serve as a heirloom. It's just so much, but also it was um, a a stream of creating wealth that could be that I've now been able to utilize for different things. And so I help mom build that brand. We call it Dainty, fine jewelry. And the reason why we call it Dainty was because my mom would always describe everything she saw that she thought was creative and beautiful. And she would say, that is so dainty. So when we talked about it, having a brand name, I'm like, why don't we just call it Dainty? Because you're going to probably, curate and create pieces that are all going to be dainty anyways. So that's how Dainty Fine Jewelry came about. And because I migrated or moved to the US, I also then created um, a sub brand called Dainty by Ola, because then I went to school for gemology, amongst other things. So understanding, precious stones, understanding design, and I started going into custom design. So my custom designs are under the sub brand Dainty by Ola. But like I said, it gives me an opportunity to translate people's story into pieces that they could cherish, they could pass along, and are investments for them.
So it sounds to me that Dainty is more personal to you. I don't know how that business is doing, or if it's just something you just do it on the side. It's just a personal thing that you just enjoy doing, and you're not trying to scale that business at all, correct? Or is it something you're also trying to scale along with DOWA?
So, I mean, when we started Dainty Fine Jewelry, we opened up a store, we opened up a second store, and we tapped into the wholesale and retail. And I thought about, expanding beyond that. But like you said, I love the engagement with individuals, right? So we've pivoted more. We have the retail store, but we've pivoted more into and obviously I've also enhanced my skills when it comes to designing. So we've pivoted more into custom designs, which I really enjoy. I really enjoy designing like an engagement ring, um, or other pieces that serve different purpose for and hold people's stories. So even though it's personal, it's also a revenue stream that I enjoy. And scaling would be being able to create more pieces for individuals.
You started a mental health company as well. So talk to me about that a little bit. Like, this mental health. How did it come about? What is it called, and how is that doing?
Thanks for asking about that. It's actually a mental health resource platform. And actually, the reason why I started that was I was visiting Nigeria, and someone close to me had a mental health crisis. Middle of the night, we ended up rushing the person to the hospital. And one of the things I realized during that whole process um, was it was hard to find resources. Um, they talked about, for every maybe 5 to 7 patients, there's only one um, um, professional, a psychiatrist, that can attend to them. And I was like, that's crazy to me. Um, After this person went through, recovery, one of the things that kept tugging at me was somebody else is wrestling with this in their home. And because of the stigma associated with it, they're not able to ask for help. I was able to ask people for help, and we were able to find resources, even though it took some time. I wanted a platform where people could go to and easily find resources. So my first thing was doing research, um, and finding out from people that there are actually resources that existed. They're just siloed, like a lot of things, right? How do we pull together this information that it is easily found? People don't have to be in crisis to start running all around trying to figure out where to go. But then if they are, how do they find resources? And so that's why I created the mental health for all, ng.org. It's a platform where Nigerians specifically can find resources in Nigeria, but also non-Nigerians can find resources that they can tap into outside of Nigeria. But a lot of the resources, it was sort of created as a Nigerian, anywhere I am in the world. How can I find resources for a loved one in Nigeria or outside of Nigeria for them? And so that's why I created the platform. I tend to find gaps, and I want to do something about the gaps that I find. And so every year I work on it as a project. I commission someone that helps in terms of reviewing the resources. We started with a clickable PDF, which we just shared around with people in our network. The following year, we actually built a website, and the resources were categorized by different things. It could be phone lines you could call. It could be platforms where you're not calling and you're just chatting. It could be places you can walk into in any part of Nigeria. It could be support for elderly, or people going through like dementia and so on. It could be books you could read. It could be classes you could take in order to understand mental health and help support other people. But we have it categorized in different ways. And every year, like I said, we review, we build on it. Last year we added a betting tool. It's sort of a betting resource that you use to vet whichever resource you reach out to, questions you can ask them so you're comfortable, because not every there's no one size fit all, right? A resource that works for you might not work for somebody else. So we developed a questionnaire or vetting tool with the help of Nigerian mental health professionals around the world. I have about 6 of them that I sort of bounce things off of. And they kind of either give me their go ahead or they give me some feedback on how to build certain things. So we added a vetting tool. We added a sort of an AI powered chatbot where you could actually type in what you're looking for and it will give you a response instead of reviewing probably each page. And so again, the challenge wasn't necessarily a lack of resources, right? It was how do we help people find and navigate the resources that are available.
And what is it called again? Mental Health for All, you said?
It's called Mental Health for All NG. Let me make sure I'm calling it right. Mental Health for All Resources NG.com.
NG? Okay.
Mental Health for All Resources NG.com.
I'm going to add that to the description. Ola, how do you find time for all these businesses you have, all these resources and all these tools? Because most people could barely handle their 9-to-5 jobs. Most people could barely handle the one business that they've started. How are you finding time to manage 3 different businesses?
I mean, I think I meet people that juggle different things and you can't have enough time. I was just, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I was just, DOWA won a National Merit Award that was actually presented by the, it was presented by the second lady of Nigeria recently. And I got to meet several other people that are doing amazing things. And that's always the question that I ask people, like, how do you find the time? But I think for me, I would say the way I'm able to do this is through community building. I build community around everything that I do. I also tend to talk myself into the low hanging fruit. Yes, I really want to do this. Do I have the bandwidth? Do I have the resources that I can pull on to get this done? The mental health research, I really wanted to do that because I felt like it could save lives. And I had to think through how can I strategically get this done? And so I structured it as a project that is done once a year. We have an email that people can email and send suggestions and so on, but we review it once a year. I take funding from other things that I'm doing. I pull some funding from that. I hire one person that does the heavy lifting, right? And I sort of review and guide, right? Same thing with Deinté Fine Jewelry. It's a business with my mom, but I understood when we're scaling that wholesale and retail was going to limit my time. And what I really enjoy is engaging with individuals. And that's where the custom design came in, right? I can sort of scale back or push depending on what my bandwidth is, right? I can control that. I would say also with DOWA, building a community. I have a co-founder. And so when I have limited bandwidth, she's able to, do the heavy lifting. We've also built a group of advisory council members and advisors at large that are amazing. That also help in some of those areas. We've pulled together individuals and volunteers that also help. And so I think for DOWA is more like, how do you have people buy into your vision? And I think in everything else, right? How do you have people, even with Deinté, the mental health resource? Like I said, I have a collection, a group of 6 mental health professionals that are looking to do good work, right? And serve as sort of an advisory council that I tap into and they give me feedback. So I think in everything that I do, I make sure it's purpose driven. So that fuels me. But also, how can I build community around it, and be able to tap into um, others, to engage and contribute. And so it's not all on me.
Ola, what motivates you?
Helping people. I think when I was in high school, people would ask me what I wanted to be. And I would say, initially, I would say dancer. The reason, the reason my mom would like freak out. But the other thing I would say was a doctor. And that was because I wanted to help people. But I think what I realized over time is that there's so many ways to help people. You don't have to necessarily be a doctor to have impact on people, to help people realize their full potential, or realize, get connected to their purpose or access. And I think in everything that I touched, um, there that seems to be the thread across everything.
Ola, before I get into my rapid fire questions to wrap up, is there any important topic that we did not discuss today that you think we need to cover before we move forward?
I think we probably covered pretty much everything. I think we covered a lot, so I wouldn't say there's anything else necessarily that we should cover. But I think in everything that one is doing, one of the things that I talked about building community, and I'm also realizing community is not just people that look like me. You also need to look at who are your allies. I think in every revolution, in every breakthrough that's happened in this world, you allies were involved.
All right, Ola, let's start with the rapid fire questions. What is your biggest win so far?
I would say seeing seeing DOWA alums achieve the things that they're achieving and how they're unlocking their full potential. I think that, when I hear the stories, I hear the impact of the engagement, and also on our partners, when I hear um, the impact that they had on the students or on the partners, that's exactly what we're looking for. Is how there's this monumental problem of, how do we leverage resources for Africa to realize its full potential? And it's something that you have to gradually build. And it starts with each individual, each potential founder, each potential investor, each potential advocate. So when I hear their stories during the internship, right after the internship, a year after the internship, 2 years after the internship, a few more years after the internship, or our partner, um, it just brings so much joy for me to hear and see. I would say there's so many examples. Examples of a student at Drexel University engaging with Innovex, which is an energy startup in Uganda, and um, their major pain point was their testing time on an IoT software was taking weeks on end, and within 8 to 10 weeks, it was able to help shorten that testing time to a few hours. So what that meant for the partner organization when it comes to going to market, right? 9 months after that, they were now exporting their solution to 5 other African countries and India. And for the intern, what that means for him is confidence, right? And the things he has gone on to do, the things he realized after that, and um, the things he has achieved since then. And he coming back a few weeks ago and making a donation to sponsor an intern, like full circle, like it's just amazing. just amazing.
What about your biggest mistake so far?
I would say I'm sort of a perfectionist. So I would say waiting too long to start because I'm looking for the perfect opportunity, the perfect timing. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Now I know I'm aware that you have some Ghanaian friends, so I'm gonna ask you Nigerian jollof or Ghanaian jollof.
Of course, Nigerian jollof. I have tasted Ghanaian jollof, and actually Senegalese jollof, and there was this conversation I had with Akon actually twice. He was in Nigeria for an event where I saw him, and then I ran into him, of all places, at the airport in Turkey, and we brought up the conversation. And I'm like, yeah, he had a different opinion than I had, but I would think Nigerian jollof.
And of course, he said the Ghanaian jollof, right?
I'll keep that on the wraps.
All right, excellent, excellent. One book that changed your thinking.
I would say that there have been several books, but I would say the prosperity paradox. Um, and the reason why I would say that is just thinking about how we create markets, systems, and unlocking opportunity. That was just an interesting read to me, thinking about that.
So, DOWA, Deinté, and the mental health resource link. If you could only pick one, which one would it be?
If I could only pick one and I had unlimited resources, I would say DOWA.
I know that was a difficult question because
That was very.
if you could go back and tell your 25-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
I think we're always racing. We're always thinking about, doing things perfectly. You figure things out and it's going to be okay.
If you had $10,000 to invest in Africa today, what would it be?
I've always been about people, right? And I think investing in people is key. I would invest in people and platforms that unlock human capital.
One thing that needs to change for Africa to reach its potential.
Collaboration, effective collaboration. I think starting with small things. How do we collaborate with each other where we're able to build trust, build transparency and structure into what we're doing? I think if we're able to, there are a lot of people doing amazing things in silos. If we're able to come together and collaborate on different things, not recreate the wheel, I think that will go a long way.
Can Africa ever unite as one country?
Probably not politically, right? And that is okay, I think. That is okay. I think the more important question is whether Africa can become more economically integrated, right? Collaborative, like I said, and connected. And I think that's possible and that's necessary.
My final question, Ola, is what I call the bridge. I usually ask my guests to leave on the bridge something very specific, a specific contact, a specific resource, a specific opportunity, a specific advice. What would you like to leave on the bridge for the audience?
Well, I definitely have to plug DOWA in. Well, I plug everything in. But I would say if you're a student, if you're a young professional, if you're a diaspora leader looking to engage with Africa, you have to visit Doing Good Work in Africa, join the community. Don't wait, right? Don't wait until someday. Start participating now. We have opportunities on how you can participate. But I would also say, build a portfolio of contribution, not just a resume. I talked about that when we talked about the interns and the application. I truly believe that the future belongs to people who can show impact and not just credentials.
Man, Ola, thank you so much. This was excellent. Thank you so much. What you do for the continent, what you're doing for the youth, I think is people like you that definitely impact Africa and make changes happen. I really appreciate all your hard work that you've put in to creating DOWA and all the other stuff you're doing, even for mental health. I really thank you and I appreciate everything. And thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you as well. So I thank you so much.
Thank you, Kwame, for giving me this platform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bye.